Per boy yells, "Stop." Billionaire stunned by the shocking reason. Before we go further, please ensure to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories like this one. The city moved like a machine, grinding, pulsing, unrelenting. Its gears were people, taxis, buses, street vendors, and office workers all flowing through concrete veins. Each red light blinked in rhythm, each horn a note in the mechanical symphony of the morning rush. In the middle of it all, untouched by the noise, a black limousine cruised through the chaos like a bulletproof thought. Inside sat Victor Hale, billionaire, CEO, power broker. He was the kind of man who'd built his fortune not by dreaming, but by deciding. Every minute of his life was carved with precision. Punctual, ruthless, silent. The inside of the car was a different world. Soft leather seats, tinted windows shielding him from the outside, a refrigerated compartment humming quietly beside him. The city might have been roaring outside, but in here, it was still. Sterile. Victor didn't look up as the limo changed lanes. His attention was glued to the screen in his palm, scrolling through market reports. Red arrows, green arrows, percentages, projections. Numbers were cleaner than people. They obeyed. They didn't beg. They didn't cry. "Cut through East 53rd, he said flatly. "I still on the screen." "Yes, sir," the driver responded, turning down a narrower road that most high-end vehicles avoided. Victor barely noticed the shift in scenery. The buildings here were older, grimier. Fire escapes clung to brick walls like skeletons. Faded graffiti scrawled over metal doors. A forgotten stretch of the city, invisible to someone like him. And then it happened. A sound shattered the stillness of the car. Not the usual horn or siren. No, this was human. Raw. Piercing. "Stop." The limousine screeched violently as the driver slammed the brakes. Victor lurched forward, his phone flying from his hands and thudding softly against the carpet. His heart slammed once against his ribs, not fear, just surprise. Disruption. He hated disruptions. What in God's name? He snapped, already reaching for the door handle. The city air rushed in the moment he opened it. Sharp. Cold. Loud. Victor stepped out onto the street, jaw clenched tight, his expensive shoes clicking against the asphalt. He scanned for whoever had caused the delay. Then he saw him. A boy stood directly in front of the limousine. Arms stretched wide. Thin, trembling, like a human roadblock. He couldn't have been older than 10. Barefoot. Hair matted. A threadbare T-shirt hung from his bony shoulders. Dirt clung to his skin like a second coat. But what struck Victor wasn't his appearance. It was the look on his face. Terror. Not fear of getting hit. Not fear of being yelled at. This was something deeper. Urgent. Pure. Victor's anger hesitated. He stepped closer, towering over the boy. "Are you out of your mind?" he barked. "You could have been killed." But the boy didn't flinch. He didn't even look at him. He pointed. Victor followed the line of his shaking arm to a storm drain near the curb. Nothing unusual about it. Rusted metal. Trash pushed up against the edge. Water trickling beneath. "She's in there," the boy whispered, voice hoarse. "My sister." She fell in. Victor blinked. For a second, he thought he'd misheard. The noise of the city pressed in again, cars honking behind them, a cyclist yelling as he swerved around the stopped limo. A few people had started to slow down, curious. Watching. The boy took a shaky step forward. "Please," he said, louder now. "She's down there. She can't get out." Victor didn't know what to say. He looked at the grate again, his mind struggling to process the absurdity. A child. In a drain? Was this some trick? A scam? But the boy's face said otherwise. Tears welled up in his eyes. His fists clenched. He wasn't playing. He wasn't even paying attention to the billionaire standing in front of him. The limo, the suit, the anger, none of it mattered. Only the drain. Victor felt something foreign stir in his chest. He tried to swat it away with logic. He had a meeting. He was already behind schedule. He didn't have time for theatrics. But he couldn't move. His feet stayed planted as if held there by the sheer weight of the boy's desperation. "Help her," the boy said again. "Somebody, please." People had started recording. Phones raised like shields. A few murmured behind their screens, wondering what was going on. Still, no one moved forward. No one approached the boy. Victor looked around. No one else was going to do a damn thing. He sighed, long and heavy. Then, without saying a word, he stepped beside the boy and crouched down, peering toward the drain. He couldn't see much. Just blackness. But there, if he listened, he could hear something. A sound. Faint. Wet. Soft. A whimper. Real. His breath caught. The boy looked at him then, really looked at him for the first time. Their eyes locked. And for just a moment, Victor Hale, the man who commanded boardrooms and crushed rivals, stood completely still, stunned not by what he saw, but by what he felt. It wasn't the drain. It wasn't the crying. It was the boy. Because Victor realized something unsettling. This child had stopped the world, not with power, not with money, but with love. Sheer, unstoppable, undeniable love for someone helpless. And Victor had no idea what to do with that. Victor Hale knelt on the wet pavement, eyes fixed on the rusted grate. Water sloshed beneath it, dark and fast-moving. Bits of trash swirled in the current, vanishing into shadows. The sound was steady, like a whisper rising from underground. He should have walked away. Every voice in his head told him to leave it, to let someone else deal with it, to return to the limo, dry off, and get to the meeting that would decide the future of his company. That's what Victor Hale did. He made decisions, cut losses, avoided emotion like a plague. But this boy. Victor glanced at him again. The kid stood rigid beside him, fist clenched, jaw trembling. Still barefoot, still shaking, but with eyes that didn't waver. Not from fear. Not from Victor. She's in there, the boy said again, his voice firmer now. Emma. She slipped. Victor didn't ask how. Didn't ask why. None of it mattered. He stood and barked over his shoulder, "Get the tire iron." Now. The driver hesitated for a fraction too long. Victor turned. Move. Seconds later, the man returned, tool in hand. Victor took it without a word. Dropping to his knees, he wedged the iron beneath the edge of the grate and pushed. It groaned but held firm. Years of rain, rust, and neglect had sealed it shut like a vault. He gritted his teeth and leaned harder, muscles straining. His designer suit clung to him now, soaked from knees to collar. A sharp burst of rain from earlier had left puddles along the curb, and dirty water now soaked through his shirt. Still, he pressed down, ignoring the cold, the discomfort, the watching crowd. With a sudden creak and pop, the grate shifted. Victor seized the edge, pulled, and lifted it free. A gust of foul air surged up from the drain, thick with rot and mildew. The boy didn't flinch. He dropped to his stomach and peered into the dark void. Victor crouched beside him. His eyes adjusted, searching past the grime-coated tunnel walls. It was narrow, cramped. But down there, somewhere, he heard it. A cry. Faint. Muffled. Real. Victor's breath caught. The weight of the moment pressed against his chest like something unfamiliar. It wasn't fear, and it wasn't guilt. It was older. Forgotten. His hands trembled slightly, slick with grime. The boy looked at him again, not with awe or gratitude, but with expectation. You're strong, the boy whispered. You can help. Victor didn't speak. The suit didn't matter anymore. The meeting didn't matter. The empire he'd built felt very far away, like it belonged to someone else. Someone colder. He leaned closer to the drain, water splashing over his knees, and stared into the dark. For once, Victor Hale didn't know what came next. But he knew he wasn't walking away. Not this time. Victor Hale had never feared confined spaces. Boardrooms were tighter. Deadlines more suffocating. But as he stared down into the narrow tunnel, something ancient and uncomfortable stirred in his chest. He descended into hostile mergers and legal warfare without blinking. But this was different. He handed the tire iron back to his driver. His voice was low, but firm. Keep the grate up. Don't let it fall. The boy, barely more than a shadow against the light, looked up at him, silent, watching. Victor rolled up his sleeves. The fabric, already drenched and creased, peeled from his arms with a cold slap. His expensive watch, waterlogged and useless, he tossed onto the sidewalk. It landed with a dull thud. Then, without pause, he lowered himself into the drain. It was tighter than he expected. The concrete walls scraped his shoulders, and the stench hit him like a blow: mold, sewage, decay. But he pressed forward, wading through knee-deep water that sloshed with every movement. Bits of debris floated past, soda cans, plastic wrappers, things he didn't care to identify. Behind him, the daylight faded. Ahead, only dimness and the soft, broken sobs of a child. Emma, he called, voice echoing down the tunnel. Silence. Then a whimper. He inched forward. His shoes caught on something submerged, and he nearly fell. The tunnel narrowed, pressing in on both sides, forcing him to hunch. His tailored shirt tore at the shoulder. He didn't stop. Emma, He tried again. It's okay. I'm here. This time, a response quieter, but closer. Help? Victor paused. The sound pierced something deeper than nerves. He hadn't heard a child say help in years. Not since his own childhood, when he'd screamed at himself. Once, from a hospital hallway while strangers argued outside. He shook the memory off like water. Not now. A few feet further, he spotted her. Curled into a nook beside the tunnel wall was a little girl. So small, she looked more like a doll than a person. Her hair was soaked, clinging to her cheeks. Her dress was torn, one shoe gone. Her wide eyes stared up at him, glassy with tears and fear. Victor's heart, so long guarded by strategy and pride, cracked. It's okay, he said softly, kneeling. I'm going to get you out. She flinched at first, but he reached out slowly, carefully. His hands were rough and cold. Hers were tiny and trembling. But she let him lift her. As he turned, he realized how far he'd crawled in. The tunnel stretched long behind him. Light shimmered faintly in the distance. His legs ached. His back protested. But he gripped her tight and began the slow, careful crawl back through the darkness. Behind them, the city went on, busy, blind. But in that tunnel, something had changed. Victor Hale had gone in a man obsessed with time, and come out with something far more valuable in his arms. Victor Hale emerged from the storm drain soaked to the bone, his tailored shirt clinging to him like a second skin, streaked with filth. His polished shoes were ruined, his designer trousers scraped and stained beyond repair. None of it mattered. In his arms, trembling but alive, was the little girl. Her small frame weighed next to nothing, but Victor carried her as if she were made of glass. Her fingers had curled into the fabric of his shirt, her head pressed to his chest. She made no sound, but her breathing was fast and shallow, proof she was still holding on. The crowd, which had swelled in his absence, was silent. Dozens stood frozen, their phones pointed but lowered. No one spoke, not even the boy. Victor reached the edge of the curb and handed the girl up into the waiting arms of a woman who had rushed forward, a street vendor, judging by her apron. She cradled the girl close, shouting for blankets, water, anything. The boy rushed forward. Emma. He dropped beside his sister, wrapping his arms around her, tears spilling freely now. She whispered his name and buried her face into his chest. Victor stood over them, panting, silent, rain dripping from his brow. The driver offered a towel, eyes wide with disbelief. Sir, call an ambulance, Victor interrupted, voice hoarse. But we don't even know who they are. Victor turned, his glare sharp. Now. The driver hesitated only a moment before scrambling to his phone. Victor turned back to the children. The boy had taken off his own shirt and was trying to warm his sister, shielding her from the chill. What's your name? Victor asked, crouching low. The boy looked up, suspicion flashing in his eyes. Leo. Leo, Victor repeated, almost tasting the name. How did she end up in the drain? Leo hesitated. Then, voice tight with guilt, he said, we were playing. There was this board, over the hole. We walk over it all the time. But this morning, it broke. Victor nodded, absorbing the words, watching the boy's trembling lower lip. He wasn't looking for excuses. He was carrying responsibility like it was sewn into his skin. You jumped in after her? Victor asked. Leo shook his head, ashamed. No. I ran. I didn't know what to do. Victor didn't respond immediately. He simply looked at the boy, then at the girl, and then at his own hands, cut, dirty, raw. He flexed his fingers as if surprised they had done something so uncharacteristic. The sound of sirens began to rise in the distance. Red and blue lights flickered around the corner. Victor stood up. His body ached now. The adrenaline was fading, and in its place came pain. His knee throbbed from the crawl, his back screamed from the weight of effort, and yet there was no anger in him. Only silence. A medic team burst onto the scene. The lead EMT knelt by the children, checking Emma's vitals while another wrapped a thermal blanket around her. A third medic helped Victor sit on the limo's running board. He didn't resist. As they checked his breathing, asked routine questions, he stared straight ahead, eyes fixed on nothing. The street, the people, the horns blaring in the distance, it all blurred. Then a hand touched his sleeve. Leo. He stood beside Victor now, unsure but determined. His shoulders were square, even if his lips still trembled. Thank you, he said, barely more than a whisper, for helping her. I didn't think anyone would stop. Victor looked at him fully for the first time. Not just the ragged clothes or the dirty face, but the eyes. Unflinching, honest. They reminded him of someone. Someone long buried under years of silence. No one else did, Leo added, voice firmer. Victor exhaled, a breath that had waited years to be released. Neither did I, he admitted. There was a beat of silence. Then Leo said, "But you did." Victor gave the faintest nod. The ambulance doors slammed shut with Emma safely inside. The medics promised she would be okay. Cold, shaken, but no serious injuries. They'd take her and Leo to the nearest hospital. Victor didn't move. The driver approached cautiously. "Sir, your meeting, cancel it." The driver blinked. "Sir, cancel the meeting," Victor repeated, eyes never leaving the street. The driver opened his mouth, thought better of it, and simply nodded before backing away. The limo loomed beside him, doors open, heat pouring out. But Victor didn't step in. Instead, he looked at the boy, then the departing ambulance, then down the street where he'd been headed not 30 minutes ago, a world away from now. He thought of the billion-dollar deal waiting for his signature. The mergers, the acquisition, the endless zeros. They had never made him feel like this, like something had been shaken loose. He wasn't a hero. He didn't pretend to be, but he had stopped. He had listened. He had crawled into darkness for someone who could give him nothing in return. And that changed everything. A woman nearby stepped forward. She was older, maybe in her 70s, wrapped in a plastic raincoat and holding a cracked phone. She said nothing, just looked him in the eyes and nodded. Not a gesture of awe, but respect. Victor lowered his gaze. He didn't need applause. He only needed to make sure those kids were safe. As the ambulance pulled away, Leo sitting beside his sister, Victor watched until the lights faded into the city mist. And for the first time in years, he stood in the middle of a busy street, with nowhere more important to be. The next morning, Victor Hale walked into his office at Hale Corp Tower, and everything felt smaller. It wasn't the building. His penthouse suite was still the same height, glass walls showcasing the glittering city beneath his feet like a kingdom. But the space around him felt constricted, stiff. His assistant trailed behind him, rattling off updates. Stock projections, call requests from Tokyo, messages from clients frustrated he had missed yesterday's meeting. Normally, Victor would have absorbed every word, anticipating his moves like a chess grandmaster. But today, his gaze slipped to the muted news broadcast playing on the wall-mounted TV. Footage of himself crouched beside a storm drain played for the entire city to see. Reporters huddled around. The boy beside him, his suit drenched and stained. The headline beneath read like a parody, "Billionaire CEO rescues homeless girl from storm drain." Victor's assistant's voice faded into static. He stared at his own image on the screen, this strange version of himself, unguarded, broken open in public. What did he even look like to them? "Sir, the board meeting is rescheduled for 10. They want reassurance the acquisition is still on track after yesterday's incident." Victor barely blinked. "Sir." His assistant shifted, clearly unnerved by his silence. Victor finally turned to face him. "Do you know that boy's name?" His assistant blinked, caught off guard. I think. Leo, wasn't it?" "They filed a report with Find Him," Victor said, cutting him off. "Find out where he and his sister live. Get me that address." The assistant stared as if a new language had been spoken. "Sir, about the board, now." The ice in Victor's tone could kill a conversation faster than any closed-door meeting. His assistant swallowed, nodded, and hurried away, still unsure what had just happened. Victor sank into the leather chair behind his massive mahogany desk. The skyline sprawled beneath him, endless and glittering. A kingdom he'd built from scratch. It had never looked so unimportant. He stared at the TV again. They were replaying the footage, this time from a different angle. Recorded by someone in the crowd. The video panned from his limousine to the boy standing in the middle of the street, shaking, screaming. Victor winced at the sound of his own voice, angry and sharp when he'd first stepped out of the car. He hadn't seen it. He'd been so oblivious. Ordinary people, strangers in pain. He had become an expert at looking through them. His father would have been proud. "Never let the world slow you down, son. Speed wins." Speed had built an empire. Speed had left him alone. A faint knock snapped him back. His assistant entered, holding a single sheet of paper. "Found them. Homeless shelter on the east side." Victor took it, scanning the address. East side. a part of the city he hadn't set foot in for years. A place where his towers cast deep shadows but gave no warmth. No reason to go, until now. Clear my calendar, Victor said, standing. His assistant blinked. For the morning? For the next 2 days. The assistant opened and closed his mouth. I'll tell them. Victor gave a rare, thin smile. Let them worry about themselves for once. Victor left the tower that afternoon in a simple car, no limo, no tints. The driver looked uncomfortable but said nothing. The streets changed the further east they drove. Glass facades gave way to brick and concrete. Shiny storefronts were replaced with boarded-up windows and faded for lease signs. Sidewalks cracked. People wore their hardship on their faces like bruises. Victor had poured millions into revitalization projects, funneling money through foundations and PR campaigns. But driving through the neighborhood, a neighborhood he now admitted he had never really seen. Those press releases felt like empty paper. They pulled up to the shelter. A squat, aging building wedged between a liquor store and a faded laundromat. The sign out front was chipped, paint peeling. Eastside Family Services. Victor stepped out into the cold air. No suit jacket to shield him this time. Just a simple coat. People watched from the stoop. Some recognized him. Others didn't care. He walked through the door and felt the weight of 100 tired eyes latch onto him. A staff worker approached, cautious. Can I help you, sir? I'm here to see Leo, Victor said. She blinked, unsure if this was some joke. Then her face softened. Right. Come with me. Victor followed her through narrow hallways lined with cots and thin curtains. The smell of industrial cleaner and desperation clung to the walls. She stopped at a door, knocked gently, and peeked in before nodding for him to enter. Victor stepped inside. Leo sat on a worn-out bunk, legs dangling. His sister, Emma, lay curled up beside him, sleeping soundly. Leo looked up. His eyes flashed a mix of surprise and wariness. What are you doing here? Leo asked. Victor stepped closer, lowering himself onto a plastic chair across from the bunk. He didn't rush. He didn't smooth his words. I wanted to make sure you were okay. Leo stared, confused. No one had ever checked on them before. Victor leaned his elbows on his knees. And I wanted to know if you'd let me help. Leo stared, and in that silence, Victor admitted something to himself. For the first time in decades, he was ready to slow down. The courtyard of Eastside Family Shelter wasn't much, a cracked basketball hoop with no net, a few rusting benches, and a narrow stretch of concrete bordered by a half-dead hedge. Still, in the soft golden light of the late afternoon, it felt quieter than the towering boardrooms Victor Hale had spent his life in. Victor sat on a bench across from Leo, who perched with folded arms on the edge of a low planter. Emma, still recovering, rested under the watchful eye of one of the shelter staff through a nearby window. The boy's eyes kept drifting back to his sister, alert to every movement she made. She'll be okay, Victor said gently. The doctors said so. Leo gave a small nod but didn't look at him. They always say that. Doesn't mean much when you've got nowhere to go after. Victor let that sit in the air a moment. The words stung more than he expected. I could help you, Victor said finally. Not just with a hotel room or a check. I mean really help. I have resources. Leo's head turned slowly, skeptical. Why? You don't know us. I didn't know you, Victor admitted. Now I do. That made the boy pause. His shoulders lowered slightly, suspicion giving way to curiosity. Victor looked down at his hands. Clean today. Not like yesterday when they were coated in filth from the storm drain. When I was a kid, I was poor too. Not like this, but close. My father left. My mother worked 3 jobs and still couldn't afford the heat in winter. And when people saw me on the street, they saw a statistic. Leo's eyes widened slightly. You were poor. Victor nodded, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. I used to sit on curbs just like that one, dreaming of getting out. I worked hard. Got lucky. Built something. Then why'd you stop seeing people like me? Leo asked, not cruelly, just truthfully. Victor's breath caught. A bird fluttered past the hedge. Somewhere down the street, a horn honked. But in that moment, all Victor heard was the boy's voice echoing inside his chest. I didn't mean to, Victor said slowly. I got busy building walls. Thought they'd keep me safe. Turns out they just kept everyone else out. Leo nodded, not fully trusting, but not turning away either. After a moment, he said, my mom died when Emma was 2. Dad left before that. I've been taking care of her since. Victor let that sink in. You're doing a good job. She could have died, Leo said, eyes glossy. But she didn't, Victor said. Because of you. You saw what others didn't. Leo's jaw clenched. He wiped his face quickly. People walk past us like we don't exist. No one ever stopped before. Victor's voice dropped. Neither did I. A long silence passed between them, not uncomfortable, more like the space after a storm. Then Victor leaned forward. What if I helped you both? He asked. School. Food. A safe place. No tricks. No conditions. Leo's eyes narrowed. Why would you do that? Victor didn't answer right away. He just looked at the boy and saw something startling. Himself. Not in the face, but in the eyes. That fire. That grit. The refusal to quit even when the odds were stacked. Because no one ever did that for me, Victor said. Leo looked down, processing. Victor continued. I'm not here to make it all go away overnight. But I can get you out of this place. Into something better. Like what? A mansion. Leo scoffed. Victor chuckled. No. Just a home. A real one. Leo didn't respond right away. He glanced through the window again at Emma. She was smiling now, coloring with a staff member. You'd help us both? Of course. Leo met his eyes. Then yeah. Okay. We'll try. Victor didn't smile wide. He only nodded. But something lifted off his chest, something that had weighed him down for years. This wasn't a charity project. This was the beginning of something real. That evening, Victor made arrangements. A private doctor to monitor Emma's recovery. Temporary housing in a modest, family-style apartment he owned but rarely used. He called it a starter home, but Leo's eyes widened like it was a palace. They packed their things. A worn backpack, 2 t-shirts, and a stuffed bunny with a missing ear. That was it. That was their life. Victor didn't let it show, but inside, it gutted him. As they loaded into the car, Leo insisted on sitting beside his sister. Victor let them. He sat up front for once, next to the driver, watching the city lights blur past as they drove west. It was quiet, peaceful, but something was brewing. Not just change. Purpose. The apartment was warm. Simple, but filled with light. Clean sheets. A stocked fridge. A sofa that didn't sag. Emma walked through the rooms like it was a castle. Leo didn't speak much, but his eyes roamed constantly, alert to every sound, every unfamiliar comfort. Victor gave them space. He stayed long enough to show them how the stove worked, where the emergency contacts were, and then he started to leave. But at the door, Leo stopped him. Wait, the boy said, holding out a crumpled piece of paper. Victor opened it. A crude drawing. 3 stick figures, one taller with a tie, and 2 smaller ones holding his hands. Above them, in messy block letters, thank you. Victor stared at it longer than he should have. Leo scratched his head. It's kinda stupid, but Emma made me do it. Victor looked at him. It's not stupid at all. He folded it with surprising care and tucked it into his coat pocket. Then, with a nod, he turned to leave. Leo's voice stopped him again. Are you coming back? Victor looked over his shoulder. Yeah, he said. I am. And for the first time in years, he meant it. Victor Hale stood at the entrance of East Side Family Shelter, his hand resting lightly on the doorframe. The place that had felt like a relic, a forgotten corner of the city, now felt more like the beginning of something important. Something he had been too blind to recognize for years. Behind him, the city hummed, a distant roar of life continuing as it always did. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the skyline. But for once, Victor didn't look up at the glass towers. His eyes were fixed on the small, humble building ahead, the one that had reintroduced him to the world he'd ignored for far too long. Leo and Emma had come a long way since that fateful day. They were thriving now. Their new home, still small but full of promise, was just the start. The days of survival were behind them. Victor made sure of it. He had taken responsibility. Not as a savior, he'd never see himself as that, but as a man who had finally realized what it meant to care. The door opened behind him, and Leo walked out, his face beaming. The boy had changed. His usual wariness had softened, replaced with the warmth of a child who no longer had to worry about tomorrow. Mr. Hale, Leo said, his voice a little uncertain but filled with gratitude. Victor turned to face him, noting the change. How's Emma? She's doing great, Leo answered, eyes alight. She's starting school next week. Can you believe that? Victor smiled. I can. I always believed in you. Leo grinned shyly. You're not like the other rich people I've met. Victor raised an eyebrow. How so? They actually care, Leo said simply. You've done more for us than anyone else ever has. Victor nodded, trying to hide the lump forming in his throat. I'm glad I could help. Emma wants to say thanks, too. Leo stepped aside, and Emma came running out, her small arms extended. She hugged Victor tightly, her bright eyes shining with sincerity. Thank you, Mr. Hale, she exclaimed, holding up her stuffed bunny. It had a new ear now, thanks to the shelter staff who had patched it up for her. Victor bent down, smiling warmly. You're very welcome, Emma. Leo stood back, watching them with an expression that could only be described as pure contentment. For once, the hard edges that life had carved into him softened. He wasn't the same boy who had been crying for help on that busy street corner. He was stronger, more certain of himself. Are you really going to keep helping us? Leo asked quietly, a little shy but hopeful. Victor looked at him, then at Emma, who still clung to her bunny. He didn't hesitate. I'm going to do more than that, he said, his voice calm but firm. I'm going to make sure you never have to worry about survival again. I'm here for both of you. Leo's expression softened, and for the first time, the boy truly believed it. Victor's hand rested on Leo's shoulder as they walked back toward the car. For a moment, they were just two men walking side by side, a billionaire and a boy who had fought to survive. But what mattered wasn't their difference in wealth. It was that, for once, they stood on the same level. The limo waited for him, but Victor hesitated at the door. Leo, he said, glancing back. I've spent a lifetime building wealth and power, but I've realized it doesn't mean anything if you don't use it for good. Leo met his gaze, his face full of newfound respect. It's not about what you have, Victor continued. It's about what you do with it. That's what matters. Leo nodded, understanding for the first time what Victor truly meant. There was a world of difference between simply having power and using it to change lives. The car's engine hummed to life, but Victor stayed at the curb, watching Leo and Emma walk back into the shelter. The doors closed behind them, but the change had already begun. The beginning of something better. For all of them. Victor climbed into the car and leaned back against the leather seat, feeling the hum of the engine as it carried him away. He didn't need to look at the skyline anymore. He had already built something more valuable than anything money could buy. He had found the purpose he'd been searching for all his life. To make a difference. Not in boardrooms or high-rises, but in the lives of people who needed it most. As the limo turned the corner, Victor glanced out the window one last time at the shelter. And for the first time in a long while, he wasn't looking forward to what came next. He was already content. If you enjoyed this story, ensure to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing, heartfelt stories like this. Also, let us know where you are watching from and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Did Victor's transformation surprise you? What do you think of Leo and Emma's journey? We'd love to hear your opinion on the powerful message of change and compassion. Don't forget to share this video with your friends and family who need a little inspiration. Stay tuned for more incredible stories that will touch your heart and inspire change.